Okay, all right. So, before I begin talking about me, I think I should for a moment mention this chap. I don't know if anybody here would ever remember him, but that's my dad, Gerard Friedlander, who was for many years at Dampt. So I had a big mathematical influence. I think there's one face that lights out right there, of course, yes. My mother was an artist, and my father was a mathematician. It was an ideal mixture. So yeah, I call myself a scientific artist, but probably I'm really a mathematical artist, and it just turned out that science was the big inspiration on me as a child. So I really want to start at the beginning, because I think the key things about artists is that we're childlike. It's playfulness and innocence that makes you decide to pursue something that's so profoundly playful. And my big inspiration, because I grew up in the space age, was space, and these are the sort of things that inspired me as a kid. That's the cover of my astronomy book when I was about the age shown in that picture there, about 7 or 8 years old. And these are the kind of illustrations that we would find in the books then being created for what they imagined space travel would be like in the future. This was all obviously way off in the future at the time, and these are illustrations by Chesley Bonestell. I found them totally inspiring, and I wanted to literally build my own spaceship and drive off, fly off, and explore outer space. So as a child, that's exactly what I did. But as a growing young man, I went off to study physics, and it was while I was reading physics at Sussex University, I went up one day to see a great exhibition of kinetic art in London. This is my magnificent installation they built on the roof of the Haywood. It was there for 30 years approximately. And in the museum gallery there, the artist that most inspired me was Nicholas Schoeffer, and these pieces, actually they're not from the exhibition, they're from his studio. I never met the man, but I became good friends with his widow, and so she let me take lots of photographs around the space, which she's still got, and it's still all there. I came home from the great exhibition and immediately started creating my own work, and of course one of the things we all know about, which is so naturally beautiful, is caustics. So that one of the first things I ever did was to make light shows based on caustics and dream about building things on a giant scale. But at that point, I still was working on a very small scale. And one of the other things I started messing around with was flow. This I call a magic fountain. And there's another example of it. And these early pieces were very crudely made. I went off to art college next and decided I better train in art, and these are some of the early pieces I did in art college. This is rays of light. Then this is not laser beams. These are produced using a conventional light source, just grazing across the surface, and various different kind of optical elements which I'd borrowed out of a physics lab type of situation, or just found some old lenses. So I was still really playing around on the borders of what physics is all about, but I was now beginning to explore it as an artist. And of course, here's another great thing that we've seen other people do, and with much more flair than I did. This is all on a very small scale, but the fascinating things about fluid flow, I think a lot of artists probably started playing around with it at that time. That's the 2 pieces I did. And then immediately I started playing more with optics, because I think the things that most fascinated me were light and movement, and well, maybe that's because of my initial childhood fascination with space travel. But I was also interested in stage, and I did quite a bit of stage lighting in my youth. So that's an example of a stage set, different view on it, another view on it. Of course, it's very abstract. The stage set is in no way trying to depict something in a clear representational way, but the idea was it was a sort of jungle, kind of mountainous region, and the play was themed around the ancient Far Eastern myth about the monkey god Hanuman. Well, one day I decided to start playing around with vibrations, and these are going to turn out to be quite important to me later on. This is a little piece I built again as a student, which I called the Light Harp, and recently I made a couple of much larger pieces based on exactly the same idea. I don't know if I'm going to have time to show you that, but I'm just going to take a pause here now, because Andre had a wonderful quote, and one of the most famous quotes from 20th century artists, about a line being a dot being taken for a walk. But that quote is nearly always misquoted, even when you see it printed up in exhibitions, as taking a line for a walk. And when that happens, this misquote, it doesn't seem to bother people in the art world, but to a mathematician right away you think, hang on, what does it mean to take a line for a walk? If you take a line for a walk, of course you create a surface. And at some point I asked myself, how can I make light sculptures? I want to be able to generate the sensation of something that occupies three-dimensional space but is not made of anything that's sort of, solid, like there's two little motors here driving this loop that I'm spinning around. So my preoccupation became how to kind of dematerialize the substance out of which the sculpture was made. And it turned out that taking a line for a walk, in this case sort of a ring being spun round and round, was a very, very interesting idea. And then I made a little miniature skipping rope at some point, and hey, it did things I wasn't expecting to happen, which is why I titled this talk Serendipity and the Wave, and I'm going to come back to this at the end, and the performance is really about exploring how I got to that moment, and then you'll see that in the flesh, so to speak, rather than just a blurry old photograph of it. But taking that line for a walk led me to, well, you've probably all seen the piece in the room next door, led me to that, and the performance will be about that as well. So there's some more of my stage designs, and I guess I was doing this, this is a long time ago still, it's like back in the 1980s, and I worked mostly with avant-garde musicians, because it gave me the freedom to do essentially whatever I wanted, just like the school play where we were looking at a moment before. I had the freedom just to come up with something completely abstract, which was expressive. It added to the emotion of the evening, but it didn't have to tell a story. And this is some work we did on the South Bank. That's at the Queen Elizabeth Hall. And I met a man who had a whole orchestra, and he dreamed of presenting classical or relatively traditional music. This is Stravinsky, actually, it's the Firebird Suite, but he wanted to do it in a modern sort of way. So this was an attempt to fuse these two things together. This is years before Nigel Kennedy developed a reputation as a popularizer of classical music, and it was a kind of interesting experiment. I'm glad to have taken part in it, but I could see it was a struggle to kind of mesh together the very conflicting tastes. I went back to working more with installation art, which I think, probably for me anyway, the installation was the key thing, that I like to work on light for art's sake, or art for light's sake. And this is a portrait that appeared on a French magazine, Actuel, and this is our whole team. This is how they showed us. This is the first time I did an exhibition where I was essentially the curator of the exhibition. And this is kind of like a break for me, because having gone through all the experimental student work, having done through the few years of stage lighting, and I said, right, I'm going to focus on trying to be an artist exclusively, and just make work that's kinetic, because that's what I want to do. These are working with fiber optics set in vibration, so these elements of luminosity and vibrational movement fascinated me. You can see the exhibition's getting pretty big already. This is in the early 90s, or maybe the mid 90s. And that was in Montreal, I think in 93, and this was in London in 95, and this is the first time I had a sort of high-profile commission. That's at BTHQ, and that's St. Paul's Cathedral in the background, so it's a great enormous window that faces out over towards the cathedral. And this great mad manic monster is all made out of fiber optics that's been set in vibration, so it's a bit like my hair. It's all sort of shaking around crazily and changing colour in a programmed way. And it was the first time we started using computers, and subsequently I learnt, I kind of went back and retrained my logical part of my brain and taught myself to write all the code. So nowadays when I write computer-based pieces that use computer-based aspects to the design, that's all my code that's been done used in it. And this is the first time I did something that was really big. So this was called Dark Matter, this piece, and exhibited in New York in 1998, and it was the winner of an international competition to create interactive light form on a monumental scale. This is about 8 meters tall, and if we can manage to, I always have trouble with this, get the video to work, was wonderful. Get an impression of it, what it was like, minus the blurry video from the time. The kids had been told that there was a motion sensor that would control the colour of the display, which was true, but it didn't work very well with this many hands all simultaneously waving, so the software crashed, and in fact it wasn't responding at all. But it didn't seem to matter. Which shows us how it's more creating the atmosphere than getting it all technically perfect that counts. And the location is the New York Hall of Science, which was originally built, the building for the 1964 World Trade Fair, and this particular room they simulated what they imagined going to the moon might look like. So they built this kind of cathedral to space travel, more or less literally, and then they hung up in the very high, 30-meter high ceiling some models that might be, they weren't the Apollo system, but they might be something roughly like what they imagined it would look like. So they didn't even know what the Apollo system would look like at that moment. So yeah, there's a slightly younger me, attempting to control the system using the primitive form of gesture recognition that I'd collaborated with another engineer to work with his system. Okay, well I think I better move on because we're so short of time. So the waves really became a fixation, and as you can see, photographs of them are very nice, but they don't capture the dynamic and the kineticism of them. So rather than showing you the whole presentation, I'll show you just a few more of these, and then we'll cut it short and we'll go to the performance. There's an awful lot more of these. I could probably talk for another 20 minutes if you allowed me, but I know I shouldn't, so I'll just bear with the structure of this. Let's see where else we can show. That's in Paris. We've arrived in the 21st century by now. And that's in Barcelona. But you can see how the waves became a kind of fixation, and the question was how all these different ways could I develop this one idea and make different installations from it. And this particular one, I must show you this as well, because this was in Berlin, and the nice thing here is the way that serendipity again plays, and chance and accidents, because I didn't plan this. I had no idea it was going to happen. A completely stark naked Japanese gentleman who's a master of Buto dance was inspired to start performing below the wave, and magic. That's the sort of thing I think that happens best in Berlin. It's a city of so many artistic collisions.
Bubbles.
Yeah, some of them are literally like bubbles. And in fact, if I'm allowed an extra few minutes, we could get up and have a look at a video which shows the bubble form, so to speak, where I project video onto them. Now this is the largest single piece I ever made. It's being assembled here and tested in a big TV studio in Bangkok. This was made for the Design Week in Milan, 2006, and the piece is about 12 meters tall. Here it is now being installed in the port of Ticinesi on the south side of the center. And the theme of that year was that there would be different light installations in every gateway around the center of the city. And this is what my one looked like when it switched on. So there we're using video projections. I designed all the projections. And this very simple idea in terms of the kineticism, we just spin the form and use it as this translucent screen. And here's another installation. We use a lot of spinning forms, and the thing of note here is that I was for the first time very consciously beginning to collaborate with science again. Although science had been inspiring all of this, this is the first time we had a specific reference. The work I've created here was inspired by the book Julian Barber wrote about the end of time. And Julian Barber is an independent English cosmologist, very well known, who has conjectured that perhaps at a fundamental level time does not exist. An idea that's taken very seriously. One of his collaborators is Penrose, and we got him to turn up. He agreed to turn up for a one-day conference in Valencia, and was an interesting experience. So we had an audience who were, again, like here, we have a mixture artists and scientists, and we were presenting them with a piece that was very consciously trying to kind of find an interaction between the boundaries between art and science. So this piece, obviously you can't depict the non-existence of time with a kinetic artwork. By definition it's illogical, but it's about atmosphere, about creating something that people can be put in a state of mind to feel perhaps something about that.
Or we should move along.
We should move along. Okay, right, well I shall do the performance then. And to do the performance I've got to change to another bit of software. Okay. Now let's see if I can get this to work right. I'm trying to find the right other piece of software. So it's all in working order. Helpful. Right. Okay, so what am I wishing to do now? This is the piece of software is actually going to control the lights that I'm about to perform with. So you'll see a relationship between the colours going on screen and the colours coming from the lights. Maybe make that a little bigger. I'm just going to turn some music on as well. I don't know if is the music coming through for you? Can you hear it? Yeah. Okay. Can the technician get the music louder? It doesn't seem to be amplified.
Paul, I have to draw this to an end. It is mesmerising, isn't it? You watch it for hours.
Turn that off.
Do you want to draw the lights up?
You can draw the lights up now. I'm turning these down.
Well, thanks a lot for that.
Yeah.
Before I invite everyone to retire, I should acknowledge that you've done extraordinarily well to sit this out for 3 hours. It has cut our time short for a drink, but I'd like to invite you to do that. But really, it's about acknowledging the generosity of all the artists who have come here to speak today. And it's been remarkably generous, and thanks to all of you for coming and sharing your thoughts and work with us. We really appreciate that. We should also acknowledge the staff and support that we've received here from the Isaac Newton Institute and from David and his staff who have supported this all the way along. So thanks to you. And then last but not least, the incredible Andre, who's took it upon himself to draw all this stuff together. Thanks a lot, Andre. Okay, let's get going.